talking about E3 1996 and October 2017 alerts. Let's be honest, if you're talking about E3 1996 right now, it sounds like you're up to something. I don't blame them in the slightest for being wary of me. Hey y'all, Scott here, and don't you just hate it when your final words are Frogger for the SNES? I think the SNES knows how that feels.
Your final breath is a beautiful thing, so you better not blurt out something fucking stupid like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for Game Boy Color. In terms of the last game released on a game console, you may think companies end their systems with a bang and a half, releasing a swan song for the ages. But instead, the last games released on a console are incredibly underwhelming, or just plain odd. So let's take a look at the last games released on game consoles. We'll mainly be looking at these in terms of North America, unless I say so. The Nintendo Entertainment System received a good amount of support from Nintendo even after the release of its successor, the Super Nintendo. A handful of these were in the forms of puzzle games released on both the NES, SNES, and sometimes the Game Boy, such as Tetris 2, Yoshi's Cookie, and the final official game released on the NES, Wario's Woods, released on December 1st, 1994. Wario's Woods is a puzzle game that is a piece of work. It's a pretty simple game when you get down to it, but I never figured out how to play it. The controls always confused me, and I'm sure I angered at least a good fourth of the population by saying that. Now that's in terms of the NES. Its Japanese equivalent, the Famicom's last game, was Adventure Island 4, released on June 24th, 1994. Clocking over to the SNES and Genesis for that matter, Frogger in 1998 was the last games for both systems. Released on October 6th, it was Frogger alright. Of course, if you want to get wacky with this statement of the last SNES game released, you can now say Star Fox 2, as it was finally given an official release on the SNES Classic Edition in September of 2017. But it wasn't released on an official cart, so you can go either way with that statement, honestly. Now with the Super Famicom, this is a bit interesting. Metal Slater Glory Director's Cut is a visual novel made by HAL Laboratory and was released on November 29th, 2000. And guess who didn't sell well? Being released so late in the console's life and being a pretty demanding game took a toll on HAL's game publishing business, and after this release, they were just straight up bought out by Nintendo, making them simply a developer rather than a publisher. The Nintendo 64's last game was pathetically nearby the introduction of the GameCube. You see, with the NES and SNES, at least the last games on those consoles came out a good few years after their successor hit the market. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, the last N64 game, released on August 20th, 2002, less than a year after the launch of the GameCube. Weirdly enough, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 was a launch title for the GameCube, being released on November 18th, 2001. Nintendo handhelds always last an embarrassing amount of time. The last official Game Boy release was Pokemon Yellow on October 18th, 1999 in North America. And apparently this fucking thing in Japan in 2001. The Virtual Boy's last game was 3D Tetris, and would you believe it didn't save the Virtual Boy? The Game Boy Colors was obviously Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets on November 15th, 2002, pretty common knowledge at this point. And the Game Boy Advance's final game was Samurai Deeper Kyo on February